Every NFL season, there are teams that surprise. There are teams that shock the world. And there are teams that are disrespected that you, yes you, can take advantage of early in the NFL schedule. That's right. In this video, I'm going to identify the teams right now that you can make some money on early this NFL season. The teams that are being disrespected. The teams that are being underrated. And the teams that you have to identify as teams to bet on in September. So in this video, I'm going to give you a few different NFL teams that I think, based on the point spreads in their first couple matchups, are being totally disrespected, underrated, and teams that I see a common theme where I believe they're better than what these point spreads are saying. And I believe that's a sign you should take advantage of these teams. You should bet on these teams. So if that sounds good, don't forget to spike the like button. 2, subscribe to the Bottom Line View for more NFL betting content just like this. And also, let me know in the comment section below which team you think is being underrated based on the point spreads within the first couple of weeks of the NFL season, and which teams you will be betting on this year. Let's kick off the underrated, disrespected NFL teams that you have to bet on with the Baltimore Ravens. Kind of sounds funny because the Baltimore Ravens, I don't think, are that underrated. But when you take a look at the first 3 weeks, this is a team that I think is advantageous. You have to take advantage of the Baltimore Ravens and the spreads in their first 3 weeks. Week number 1 is maybe the trickiest of the 3 games based on the spread because it's a big number. And the Ravens are actually being respected with this number. They are 10-point favorites versus the Houston Texans at home in week 1. That being said, the Ravens in week 1 are always pretty much a good bet. I remember last year I made them one of my best bets in week 1. They slaughtered the New York Jets. It should have been worse than it was, and they ended up covering that spread. This year, it's a John Harbaugh team that's expecting to make the playoffs, Lamar Jackson healthy, a defense that is strong, and I believe a team that always comes out, plays tough, physical football, is always ready for September because how seriously they take the preseason and training camp. They're going to crush the Houston Texans in week 1. They play a rookie quarterback. They play a rookie head coach. They play a team adjusting to new schemes on offense and defense. Baltimore, yes, has a bit of a new scheme on offense, but the defense is entering its second year under the same defensive coordinator. Remember, last year, they kind of struggled picking up that defense early last year. This Ravens team, I believe, is going to run away in week 1 versus the Houston Texans. They might legitimately run away with Lamar Jackson, J.K. Dobbins, and company. But don't forget, they have some new targets, and Roquan Smith is ready to go to start this year. He's not just being added to the team late. So the Baltimore Ravens are a team that I'm very, very high on. This is a matchup where you have a premier quarterback playing a rookie trying to get his feet wet, playing a very solid defensive team, and a team that I think can take care of business on the offensive side of the football. A veteran coach, a winning coach versus a rookie coach. This is a good bet in week 1. Then you move to week 2 and week 3 where it gets really interesting for the Baltimore Ravens from a spread standpoint. And this is why I say they're a bit underrated. In week 2, they are plus 3.5 versus the Cincinnati Bengals. Now, I understand the Bengals are the favorite to win the division. But man, the Baltimore Ravens almost beat the Cincinnati Bengals in the playoffs last year without Lamar Jackson. Not to mention without Rashad Bateman, not to mention without Odell Beckham Jr., Zay Flowers, and basically their entire offense. So this defense knows how to play the Bengals. They know how to prepare for Joe Burrow, the passing attack, the receiving core. They're very good at slowing it down. Last year, I believe in their first matchup, the Ravens won that game outright. That was with Lamar. This year, I could see this being a field goal game, and getting that hook right now is just absolutely beautiful to me. I think the Ravens could win this game outright because the Bengals do typically start the season pretty slow, and I think that they're going to struggle in week 1 with the Browns. So I feel like the value of that week 2 bet, you have to take it now to get the best value, because I think the Ravens are going to crush the Texans, which is only going to move the line in their direction for week 2, and the Bengals very well might lose to Cleveland. So I would jump on that bet right away. Week 3, the Ravens play the Indianapolis Colts. This is a team I'm fading to oblivion, okay? The Ravens are -7.5 versus the Indianapolis Colts. I would actually argue that the Ravens are going to have a tougher time with the Texans than the Colts. Let that sink in for a second. The Colts, I think their offensive line is worse than the Texans. I think that they have a less accurate, less ready NFL quarterback. They also have a rookie head coach. They have a very bad secondary. I think there's a lot of things about the Colts that scream this is going to be a bad team this year. So 7.5, I think this spread is going to be closer to 10 once we get it in week 3, because I think the Colts are not going to be a very good team this year, and I think that's going to be evident from the jump. So I really like betting on the Ravens within the first 3 weeks, and I think you're at least going to go 2-1 within these first 3 weeks with the Ravens. Moving to the next team, I really like how the Green Bay Packers are underrated entering this year, and they are. You look at these first 2 matchups that they play, and they play 2 very average football teams that I think they're just as good as, and I honestly would say they're more talented than. I would argue that the Green Bay Packers are a more talented football roster than the Chicago Bears and the Atlanta Falcons when they play these teams. And the only reason these teams are favored, yes, favored over the Green Bay Packers is because they're at home. That's the only reason. Jordan Love, yes, a little bit of a wild card. But what if Jordan Love comes out and starts throwing missiles everywhere in week 1 versus Chicago? And what if he's really spectacular? All of a sudden, that Atlanta line is going to be adjusted like crazy. And week 1, you're going to win the bet. Okay? And I'm telling you, Jordan Love can play. And I think the Packers are going to come out this year, and I think they're going to be a lot better than people think. Like, I have them going to the playoffs. I love Christian Watson. I like the additions to their offense, whether it's the rookie Reed or Musgrave. I love the offensive line. I think they're going to bully the Bears' defensive line, a very underwhelming unit on that side of the ball. And I think they're good enough on defense to slow down Justin Fields and company. I think that game will be a bit of a back and forth, a bit of a shootout, I would say. But I think the Packers have the better pass rush. I think the Packers have the better secondary. I think the Packers have the better coach. So I would take Green Bay, honestly. The Bears struggled to beat the Packers with or without Aaron Rodgers. So I might even take them to win the game in week 1. I think that bet is a solid bet. I would just look to pair both of these. Like, I'd look to bet the Packers week 1, week 2. Because if you're right about Jordan Love, and I'm right about Jordan Love, and I'm right about the Packers, they're a better team than both these teams on paper. The Atlanta Falcons, again, like just a team that I think Jordan Love's better than Desmond Ridder. Why is Desmond Ridder and Justin Fields being favored over Jordan Love? Like, I don't really know. Like, what have they proven, right? Both teams have good offensive lines. Both teams have good running games. Atlanta, Green Bay. I think Green Bay has a more talented defense than Atlanta. I think it could go either way. Matt LaFleur, Arthur Smith, the two Titans OCs back to back. It could go either way, man. And I think the Packers are just generally being undervalued as a roster, as a team. I think Jordan Love is not really given any respect. So I'd look to bet the Packers in the first couple of weeks, and that might actually carry over to week 3, week 4, etc. Then the next team is the Seattle Seahawks. The Seattle Seahawks are being underrated because I think they're a really good team. Not just like a solid to average to good team, but I think they're a really good team in terms of I think they're a lock to make the NFC playoffs this year. So that being said, they're underdogs of 2.5 at Detroit in week 2. And they're favored only by 5 points versus the Los Angeles Rams in week 1. You guys already know if you watch my content, I'm taking the Seahawks as a must bet, like best bet in week 1 versus the Rams. I already kind of explained that one. They're a much more talented team. They're at home in Seattle in that environment. They've got awesome weapons against a really bad no-name defense. And that defense for Seattle, I think, is a little underrated too. Pete Carroll will be prepared for that game. I think the Seahawks come out and they run over the Rams. So I like them to win versus LA at least by a touchdown. And then week 2, they play the Lions. A team, okay, think about it. The Lions, at home, favored by 2.5. They're likely going to lose to the Chiefs. Likely, okay? That being said, if the Seahawks destroy the Rams and the Lions lose to the Chiefs, how much is this line going to change? Is it actually going to lean towards Seattle? Because I very well think it could, especially if the Lions get blown out, which is possible. I don't think it's likely, but it's possible. So for me, I think Seattle is just as good as Detroit, if not better. Like, I really do. So for me, getting any points in that game, that could be a coin flip type of game. I think Seattle right now is being undervalued. I think they're the better team than Detroit. If this was a neutral field, which Detroit kind of is, it's not exactly one of the best home fields in football, I'd be taking the Seahawks. Because I think the Seahawks have the more proven, better defense, I would say, overall. And I like their secondary. I think Detroit doesn't really have the passing game that concerns me. Their running game is strong. Their offensive line is good. But they don't have a ton of weapons in the passing game. I don't think they can match Seattle in that regard. So I would take Seattle with the 2.5. I think that game will be super tight. After Seattle, the Tennessee Titans. The Tennessee Titans are awesome as underdogs, as we know. Under Mike Vrabel, they've been arguably the best team to bet on as underdogs. In week 1, 2, and 3, they are underdogs of a field goal or more, which is awesome. So, week number 1, they play the Saints. They're plus a field goal. It might go up to 3.5. It's really close in terms of those odds potentially moving to 3.5 points for the Tennessee Titans. So if you get the hook especially, you have to jump on that. But I'd still take the field goal with the Titans versus the Saints. I think the Saints are one of the overrated teams entering this season. I think the Titans are one of the disrespected teams. I think the Titans have a defense that a lot of people are underestimating. And I think the offense with DeAndre Hopkins, Treylon Burks, Chiggy, Derrick Henry, I think they've got enough weapons there, a lot better than last year. The only real question about them is the offensive line. And if they can get that figured out, they're going to be a much better team than people think. So I would take the Titans plus the field goal plus the 3.5 versus the Saints in week 1. I think the Saints, we'll see what they are this year. I'm not convinced. Week number 2, this one is really interesting. They play at home plus 3.5 versus the LA Chargers. Now, think about this matchup. The Titans have a defense that can get to the quarterback, a defense that's creative, a defense that's diverse, a defense that typically has given Justin Herbert some issues in terms of different coverages, different blitz packages, being diverse and different. And they're also really awesome against the run, and they're stout up front, and they play with physicality and toughness. There's also a massive edge between Mike Vrabel and Brandon Staley. Then you look at the other side of the football. You got the Tennessee Titans run game against a team that can't stop the run in the LA Chargers. So the Titans, this is the type of game they want to play. They want to run the ball. They want to keep you on the sideline. They want to be able to milk the clock. And they want to be able to dictate the pace of the game. This is a matchup made for Mike Vrabel and the Tennessee Titans. So getting 3 in the hook, LA is not a great home field advantage. That is a great bet in my opinion. So the Titans, I'd ride with them in week 1. I'd ride with them in week 2. And then in week 3, you have to think about Tennessee plus 4.5 at Cleveland. I think 4.5 is a lot considering we don't know what Cleveland is yet. I could see them beating the Bengals and this number even going up. So you might want to wait till after week 1. But man, Cleveland could be one of these teams that's a roller coaster, right? And if their weakness or their question mark is Deshaun Watson, if you have a team that was number 1 against the run on defense last year, the Tennessee Titans, play the Cleveland Browns, a team that wants to run the ball with Nick Chubb, and they shut down the run and force Deshaun Watson to really beat them. By the way, the Titans are familiar with Deshaun Watson's game. If you have that on your side, and then you have a team in Tennessee that can run the ball against a team that struggled to stop the run last year in Cleveland, seems like another matchup that might be advantageous for Tennessee, especially getting 4.5 points. Okay, so again, Tennessee just feels underrated because they're a great underdog. And as an underdog here, you're bound to go at least above 500, probably 2-1 within the first 3 weeks, betting on the Tennessee Titans. The next team is the Washington Commanders. Now, the first week's a bit tricky because they play the Arizona Cardinals, the worst team in football. This spread is going to be massive. And obviously, you have questions about Sam Howell, the Commanders overall. I will say, if I were to bet that game either way, I would bet the Commanders. I have no faith in the Cardinals. I think they're the worst roster and team by far in the NFL. I think, honestly, Sam Howell looked good. So there is a chance that maybe the books are underrating Sam Howell because I think he's better than the quarterbacks they've had. Washington's defense is actually healthy to start the year, which is a big thing. So for me, the Commanders should be able to cover, I think it's like 7.5 at this point. Then you move to week 2 where the Commanders are +3 in the hook at the Denver Broncos, a team that straight up, I understand it's in Denver, a team that straight up I think they're better than. I think the Commanders are a better team than the Denver Broncos. I really do. So I think getting a field goal is fantastic there. Then you move to the next team, which is the New England Patriots. The Patriots in week 1 are given some respect. They're playing the Philadelphia Eagles, the NFC champs. The spread was 4.5. It moved down to 3.5. If this was 4.5, I'd suggest taking the Patriots in week 1. Even if it gets to 4, I'd consider it because I think New England offensively is going to shock a lot of people. I think everyone knows how good they can be defensively, but I think there's 2 things that could play into New England's favor here. 3 things, actually. First, they're celebrating Tom Brady on that day, so that's kind of a big deal. That should get the fans rowdy at home in this game. 2, I think their offense is underrated, and I think nobody's really seen what it looks like under Bill O'Brien. And also on that point, I think the Eagles' defense is overrated entering this season, adjusting to a new defensive coordinator and multiple new starters in week 1. And then number 3, New England has a really good defense. So they could come out and actually make this game a lot more interesting, especially at home, than people are thinking. Then you move to week 2, where they're an underdog at home versus the Miami Dolphins on Sunday Night Football. That's an automatic bet. Underdog at home versus a division rival on primetime, automatic bet when it comes to Bill Belichick. They're +2.5 at this point. And then week 3, they're getting 4.5 points. I'm betting this right away at the New York Jets. That's insane. We don't even know if the Jets are good at all. And the Patriots haven't lost the Jets since, I don't know, like World War II. So for me, I'm still betting that regardless of Aaron Rodgers or Schmaron Rodgers, okay? The Las Vegas Raiders are the final team I want to discuss here that I think's underrated and disrespected. In week 1, they're getting 4 points versus the Denver Broncos. I feel like it's an even matchup. The Raiders have won just about every matchup versus Denver in recent history. They swept them last year. Then you have the Raiders in week 2 taking on the Bills, and they're getting 8 points. I don't think the Raiders should be underdogs of 8 points versus really any team in the NFL, especially a team that Josh McDaniels is very familiar with. This entire staff is, because they're from the AFC East. And this is a team in the Raiders that can run the piss out of the football. And they're going to go to Buffalo, and they're going to do exactly that. They're going to smash them in the face. I mean, remember what McDaniels did to the Bills before in terms of that strategy that won them that snow game in New England? It's going to be somewhat similar, except now you have Devontae Adams and some better weapons with the Raiders. And I just think the Raiders' offense is too talented to be given 8 points in any game. Like, I understand the Bills are going to move the ball and score points against the Raiders' defense, especially at home. But the Raiders are going to move the ball and score points too. And this game is probably going to be a one-score game because of that. So I think 8 is beautiful with the Raiders in just about any matchup. I would take it against the Chiefs. I'd take it against the Bengals, pretty much any team. So give me the Raiders plus 8 versus the Bills in week 2 as well. Those are the teams that I think are most disrespected, teams that I view as you should bet on in week 2, week 3 already. Don't even look at week 1. These are the teams most disrespected early this year by the books, by Vegas, by the point spreads. So check it out, guys. And I hope I'm able to give you an edge here to win you some money. If you're interested in what I'm doing here on the BLV, the best way to support is by signing up to Patreon. Starts at $3 a month, guys. I'm giving you all my bets every single week for the NFL for just $3 a month, guys. So thank you so much for watching. Check that Patreon out. Gronk spike the like button, and don't forget to subscribe. We'll see you soon. Peace.